So you and we're about to go on a little adventure together. That adventure is going to span 118 years of Tudors, and it's going to be one generation at a time. How does that sound to you? I'll be your host this evening. My name is Christina. Thank you for joining us here at my Tudor era Tapestry. In the early days of 1514, as the chill climbed over the garden walls, little Catherine Parr, barely 1.5 years old, took her first unsteady steps across the rust-strewn floors of the Parr townhouse. Born during the height of her mother's attendance upon Queen Catherine of Aragon, Queen of England, the child now toddled with determined chubbiness, her fair curls bouncing beneath the soft linen cap as she reached for the bright embroidery on her mother's skirts or the dangling silver balls that Sir Thomas had fastened to her tiny wrists. The household at Blackfriars hummed with the quiet industry of a court-connected family, servants sweeping fresh herbs across the floor to sweeten the air, lawn dresses hanging linens to dry in the mild sunshine that filtered through the windows, and the distant sounds of barges and hawkers drifting up from the river. Maud Green Parr, ever the devoted lady-in-waiting to the Queen, and a woman of learning and piety, cradled her eldest daughter close during the stolen moments between duties at court. She pointed to the budding flowers in the small enclosed garden and murmured simple words in English and the French she had learned in service. The child echoed back with soft babbles and delighted gurgles, her bright eyes wide with wonder at the world unfolding around her. Sir Thomas Parr, knighted the previous Christmas for his royal service, and rising steadily in the king's household as comptroller, returned often that season. He had lifted his little daughter high, bouncing her gently while recounting tales of the court's splendor, though to Cat such stories were mere soothing rhythms of her father's deep voice. He gifted her tiny trinkets, a coral teething ring, a small posy of violets gathered from the palace gardens, tokens of a father's quiet pride in the sturdy, cheerful child who had already shown a trusting gaze and a ready smile. Days passed in innocent rhythm. Cat, nestled against Maud, during evening prayers in the family's small oratory, tiny hands folded in mimicry as psalms were recited, toddling after the household doves in the gardens under watchful eyes, or listening to the wet nurse's lullabies of saints and virtuous queens. Evenings brought the family together by the hearth, where Sir Thomas might strum a lute and Maud sang softly, the child drowsing contentedly in her mother's arms amid the flicker of firelight. Margaret Pole, Countess of Salisbury, was at court serving the Queen. Maggie was 40 years old in the spring of 1514, and Queen Catherine was newly pregnant. It was new still. Not many people knew about the Queen's fourth pregnancy. Maggie had said many prayers for Queen Catherine and the child she carried. The realm needed an heir. Catherine needed to succeed. Her prayer list had been long as of late. Queen Catherine and her fourth pregnancy, Queen Meg up in Scotland, who had lost her husband at the Battle of Flodden, and just a short time later, Maggie had found out dear Meg was with child. This was her 6th pregnancy at the age of just 24. If this child survived, it would be her 2nd child to survive, and the last with her late husband, the king. Maggie's son Arthur was about to start his career at court. He was just the right age to escort Princess Mary to her new home when she was married. Maggie would miss him while he was abroad, but she was so proud of him. As summer started, Maggie received word from the north. Queen Meg had given birth, and mercifully both mother and baby had survived. Queen Meg had a spare. She had named him Alexander, the younger brother of her son, 2-year-old King James V. Maggie said a prayer for the Scottish royal family. They had been through so much, and now Meg needed to raise 2 boys on her own and run Scotland until 2-year-old King James was much, much older. The golden haze of midsummer 1514 lay over the meadows and orchards of Essex. 9-year-old Jane Parker wandered the herb garden with her nursemaid, gathering lavender and rosemary to strew on the rushes of the great hall. The sun warmed the stone walls of the manor house, its timbered galleries draped with climbing roses in full bloom, and the air hummed with the bees and the distant laughter of haymakers in the field. It was a season of plenty after a long winter, the household busy with preparations for the harvest feast. Yet the child's world remained one of simple delights, chasing butterflies with a net of gauze, feeding apples to the ponies in the stable yard, or sitting beneath the ancient oaks to listen to tales from the old retainers. Janey, her dark hair tied back with a ribbon of green silk, had grown taller in the months since Christmas. She had practiced her letters diligently each morning in the solar with her mother, Lady Alice, tracing elegant curves of French words on wax tablets, phrases her father deemed useful for a gentlewoman destined for greater spheres. Lord Morley, though often absent on the king's business, had sent a parcel from London in the spring, a small lute, and a book of illuminated prayers bound in velvet. For my clever Janey, the note read in his careful hand, that she may charm both God and men. She strummed the instrument clumsily, but with determination, the notes mingling with birdsong, as she imagined herself one day performing before the Queen. News from the wider world arrived sporadically, carried by travelers and courtiers who passed through the manor gates for ale and bread. The great event of summer was the sealing of peace with France, brokered by the rising star Thomas Wolsey. In August, Princess Mary, Henry's younger sister, had been wed by proxy to the aging King Louis XII at Greenwich. The ceremony marked tournaments and banquets. It was all a scandal at court. Princess Mary had denounced the 14-year-old Prince Charles and her betrothal to him. It was likely on the orders of her brother the king. He wasn't getting along with the Habsburgs. They had gone behind his back to make peace with France, and Henry felt betrayed. Now Mary was going to marry the King of France instead. Lord Morley, home briefly in July, before riding north again, had described the splendor to his enthralled daughter. The princess, arrayed in white satin and ermine, her train borne by noble maids. The French ambassadors bowing low as trumpets sounded, a marriage to bind two realms, he told Janey, lifting her onto his knee by the open window, where the evening breeze carried the scent of new-mown hay. Our king plays a shrewd game, and peace brings prosperity to us all. To Janey the tale was pure enchantment. She replayed it in her games, draping herself in an old veil from her mother's chest, and parading before the household chaplain as Queen Mary of France, bestowing imaginary favors on her playmates, who knelt in mock homage. She wondered what it would be like to cross the sea in a ship hung with banners, to live in palaces of marble and gold, far from the familiar rhythms of manor life. Yet the thought held a faint shadow. Whispers among the servants spoke of the French king's frailty, his many years, and how young queens in foreign lands sometimes fared ill. Jane pushed such notions aside, preferring the romance to the reality. The soft light of August 1514 filtered through the narrow windows of the parish church in Perthshire, where Meg Tudor stood veiled in quiet determination before a simple altar draped in white linen. The air carried the faint scent of summer hay drifting from the fields beyond, mingling with the incense of a hurried mass. No trumpets heralded this union, no courtiers in velvet pressed close, only a handful of trusted witnesses gathered in the shadow nave as the vows were spoken in low, resolute voices. Meg, now 24 and widowed less than a year since Flodden's slaughter, had chosen this clandestine path with a mixture of desperation and desire. King James IV's will had named her regent for their infant son, little James V, and for the posthumous child she had borne in April, Alexander, Duke of Ross, provided she remain unwed. Yet the Scottish nobility, fractious and ever watchful, had grown restless under her rule. Pro-French lords whispered of summoning the Duke of Albany from exile to claim regency. English influence was suspect, the Tudor blood a liability, in a realm still smarting from defeat. In Archibald Douglas, 6th Earl of Angus, she saw an ally, a pro-English magnate whose clan could shore up her position, whose presence might deter the wolves circling her sons. Archibald, scarcely older than she, knelt beside her in the dim light, his dark hair catching the candle flames. He had buried his first wife the year before. Now he bound himself to a queen dowager, mother to the King of Scots, sister to the King of England. The priest's words echoed softly against the stone walls, promises of fidelity, of honor, of mutual aid. Meg's hand trembled slightly as she placed it in his. She had once wed a king with pomp at Holyrood, music and poetry attending her. This marriage was born out of necessity, of a woman's need for protection in a world amidst lords and shifting alliances. Passion may have stirred, but calculation weighed heavier. She would keep her regency, she told herself. The Douglases would stand with her against Albany's faction. The rite concluded swiftly. No feast followed, no public proclamation. The couple slipped away under cover of dark, riding toward Stirling with a small escort. Word would spread soon enough, through the servants' gossip, through letters carried south to Henry VIII, through the murmurs of nobles who saw their own power threatened by this sudden alliance. Meg knew the risk. James IV's testament forbade remarriage. If she wished to retain guardianship of her sons, she hoped the Douglas strength would outweigh that clause, that her brother's favor might yet shield her from the storm she had invited. In the days that followed, as summer ripened into harvest, Meg returned to the cares of regency. Councils at Stirling, petitions from her border wardens, the endless task of balancing French ties against English overtures. She held her boys close, little James, now 2, toddling, and the infant Alexander, fragile but thriving. Archibald rode at her side in public, a tall figure in border steel, his presence a declaration of a new power. Yet already the whispers grew louder. The marriage violated the late king's will. The queen had forfeited her authority. Albany must be recalled. Meg felt the ground shift beneath her feet. The brief illusion of security crumbling as swiftly as it had formed. She had sought a shield and found instead a spark to ignite old rivalries. Letters would soon fly south to Henry, pleading for support, while in Scotland lords gathered, their eyes on the throne and on the woman who straddled 2 realms. The rose of England, transplanted north, bloomed defiantly but perilously, its petals soon to be scattered by the winds of noble ambition and the exonerable pull of divided loyalties. As the autumn light of 1514 filtered through the windows of her carriage, 13-year-old Anne Boleyn sat wondering at this curious turn of events. The trip from the Low Countries had been rustic, an overland journey to France. Her father's urgent letter had reached her in late summer. Thomas Boleyn, ever the opportunist, had secured places for both his daughters in the glittering entourage of Princess Mary Tudor, the 18-year-old sister of King Henry VIII, who was to wed the aging King Louis XII of France in a grand alliance sealed by treaty. Anne had left the refined, orderly court of Archduchess Margaret with a mixture of reluctance and anticipation. Margaret had called her La Petite Boleyn, praising her quick wit and graceful bearing in letters to Thomas. Yet the summons from home had stirred the same quiet ache she had felt when first departing Hever. Now she was off to reunite with her elder sister Mary, who had spent the intervening months closer to the English court, her own beauty and poise already drawing admiring glances. Anne was to meet up with the bridal party in Paris, hopefully before the wedding, but Anne's departure had been delayed, and she was running behind schedule. The wedding party had landed in Calais and then journeyed through Picardy's rolling fields, where the harvest had left golden stubble and the air smelled of ripening apples and wood fires. On the 9th of October the wedding took place. Princess Mary, resplendent in cloth of silver and an English gable hood, stood beside the frail 52-year-old King Louis XII, his gaze bright with triumph. Mary Boleyn, among the maids attending the new queen, watched in hushed awe as vows were exchanged. Rings slipped onto fingers, and the Te Deum rang out. Celebrations that followed were lavish. Tournaments, masques, banquets, where peacocks roasted were carried aloft, and the French court displayed its famed elegance. Yet the ideal was brief. Louis, eager to assert control over his young English bride, dismissed most of her English attendants, mere days after the ceremony, preferring French service for his queen. A few remained, Mary Boleyn among them, while Anne's arrival had been delayed by logistics. She had joined the household in Paris for Mary's coronation on the 5th of November, slipping into the radiant world of the Louvre, happy to be reunited with a sister whom she hadn't seen for over a year, who commented that she was taller than the last time they had seen each other. On the 5th of November, 1514, Mary Tudor stood, at 18, crowned Queen Consort of France. Her marriage to 52-year-old King Louis XII was less than a month old. Until this summer, her betrothed had been a 14-year-old Austrian prince. But things had changed quite swiftly. Her marriage was a result of her brother's shifting loyalty. She hadn't liked this match when Henry had told her. Louis was old enough to be her father. Louis was only 5 years younger than her father would have been if he were still alive. And Mary couldn't help but think that if her father was still alive, her life would have turned out very differently. Mary didn't think her father would have been foolish enough to pick a fight with the Habsburgs. Mary had 2 new stepdaughters. Princess Claude was 15 and Princess Renée just 4. And therein lied the issue. The king needed a son. According to French law, the king's daughters could not be his heirs. Claude had recently married herself to her cousin, the king's heir, for now, the first prince of the blood. Until Mary produced a male heir for France, her stepdaughter's husband was going to be the next king, making Princess Claude the next queen. Mary had gotten word that her sister Meg had eloped over in Scotland. She had been widowed, the mother of a king, and whether necessity or love, she had eloped with Archibald Douglas. Mary had married a 52-year-old king who needed an heir. She would eventually also be the widow of a king. Mary thought she could do it, provide an heir, and then wait out Louis's life. The king wasn't well. He was older than his years, and he wasn't long for this earth. If Mary could provide a male heir, she would be my lady, the king's mother, when Louis died, just like her grandmother had been for her father. Before she had left England, Mary had told her brother that she would do her duty, but when King Louis passed, she would choose her own next husband. Henry hadn't argued, and Mary took that as an agreement. And Meg had done exactly that. Dowager queens did not require permission. In the fall of 1514, Jane Seymour was a 6-year-old English rosebud. She had lived out in the quiet countryside at Wolf Hall. She rode her pony, practiced her needlepoint, and played with her little sisters Marjorie, now 4 years old, and Dorothy, 1. Jane's oldest brother, Edward, had traveled to France. He was 14, and needed as one of the attendants to Princess Mary, now Queen Mary of France. Jane missed him, though she didn't miss how bossy he could be. But she had more older brothers still at home to boss her. She wondered what French court was like, and did Edward remember all of his French? How many grand parties was he attending? Jane imagined all of the beautiful gowns twirling late into a rainbow. Edward must be having so much fun. She imagined herself a little older, traveling to a court to assist a princess. Maybe her sisters would be there with her. As she thought about this made-up world, she slowly drifted off to sleep. In December 1514, Catherine of Aragon, Queen of England, was heavy with child for the 4th time. She was nearing her laying-in period, and preparations were almost completed. Maria de Salinas was attentive to her oldest friend as long as she was able. She would be able to assist Catherine up until the birthing pains, but then Maria would have to depart. She was 23 now, but still unmarried and without children. It would not be appropriate for her to be in the birthing room. Maggie Pole, Countess of Salisbury, would be there. She was an old friend, one of Catherine's first in England. Maggie had been 28 when Catherine arrived in England to Catherine's 16. Now they were both grown, Maggie at 40 and Catherine at 28. Maggie had been a constant support to Catherine, and it would be a comfort to have her there. But suddenly, and early, Catherine's labor pains started. Catherine had been here before. This was too early for her baby to survive. After a labor tinged with sorrow, Queen Catherine had a son. He remained unnamed in any kind of official capacity. He was stillborn. Her sister Maria had written recently. She wrote that her 2-year-old, also named Maria, had died, a sudden illness that took the little girl in the night. But at least Maria had 2 years with her, something Catherine had never experienced. She missed her sisters, but Maria was the Queen of Portugal and very far away. Queen Catherine hadn't heard from her sister Juana in some time. The letters from her father indicated that Juana had gone quite mad. He had locked her away and dismissed most of her servants several years before. She wasn't part of Catherine's support system either. Catherine was left again to mourn, primarily alone with God. Henry was informed, and he would deal with his grief by spending time with Catherine's newest lady-in-waiting, 15-year-old Bessie Blount. Catherine wasn't sure if Henry and Bessie had entered into a carnal relationship, but she had noticed her 22-year-old husband eyeing the girl. It was only a matter of time, and Catherine knew Henry's tendencies, but he always returned to her eventually. You can share your thoughts with me at longlivethequeenpodcast@gmail.com. Slide into my DMs on Facebook or Instagram at Long Live the Queen Podcast, or join the party on Patreon, where we have extended episodes and bonus content.
They tell you while you're young, girls go out and have your fun. Then they hunt and slay the ones who actually do it. Criticize the way you fly when you're soaring through the sky. Shoot you down and then they sigh and say she looks like she's been through it. Lord, what will become of me once I've lost my novelty? I've had too much to drink tonight, and I know it's sad, but this is what I think about. And I wake up in the middle of the night. It's like I can feel time moving. How can a person know everything at 18 but nothing at 22? And will you still want me when I'm nothing new? Cute, all this crying in my room, when you can't blame it on my youth and roll your eyes with affection. And my cheeks are growing tired from turning red and faking smiles. Are we only biding time till someone else lights up the room? People love an ingenue. I've had too much to drink tonight. How did I go from growing up to breaking down? And I wake up in the middle of the night. It's like I can feel time moving. How can a person know everything at 18 but nothing at 22? Will you still want me when I'm nothing new? I know someday I'm gonna meet her. It's a fever dream, the kind of radiance you only have at 17. she'll know the way, and then she'll say she got the laugh from me. I'll say I'm happy for her, then I'll cry myself to sleep. Oh, oh. To drink tonight, but I wonder if they'll miss me once they drive me out. I wake up in the middle of the night, and I can feel time moving. How can a person know everything at 18 but nothing at 22? And will you still want me? Will you still want me? Will you still want me when I'm nothing new?